it can be scary to spend that time with yourself on your own and not being distracted by all the things that right now are pulling us in all these other directions away from that connection to ourselves. The scariness, the vulnerability, but also the creativity that comes, the insight, the reflectiveness. This stuff's awesome, but definitely bold.
You are listening to the Bold Business Podcast, where you will hear firsthand experiences about what it really takes to ensure market relevance and your company's future.
Tim Fortescue is an extraordinary communication coach. He is interested in transformation and driving success. His background actually came from basketball coaching and a passion for helping individuals grow. The ability to connect what they needed to hear with what Tim wanted to make sure that they heard has been a journey. So from volunteer high school basketball coach to founding 40 Watt Coaching is built in those moments of connection and communication. The philosophy that Tim uses centers around coaching in the full human form, not just speech patterns or situations. He's worked with renowned organizations like Nike, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. This expertise extends beyond coaching. He has done manager and leadership enablement programs for fintech giant Stripe. He's also served as managing director and senior communication coach at Own the Room, where he empowered executives as other Fortune 500 companies. In an open, deep dialogue where we're looking at things in a new light, you'll see the power of a willingness to communicate well in action and in practice. And you'll hear firsthand, he had a goal to do what he loved without going bankrupt. And not only did he achieve that, he achieved more than he could have dreamed of. And that's what we're talking about here. You were talking about it being the time of the year where you get to ease into things. Does that mean this is the time that you're thinking and reflecting on what happened and where you're going? Or is that more of a, have you already done that and now you're in the planting the seeds and doing the work and waiting? Because that can mean so many things.
It's both of those things where I wish I had more time over the holiday break to reflect on what's happened and where I want to go. But then I had this grand idea that I was going to carve out time and sit and think and go through my old notes. And then it just, boom, was gone. And that all of a sudden I was wrapping Christmas presents and doing the fun stuff with my daughters and my family, and it's over. So the reason I say that is because it's staggered. I know January is usually slow for my business as companies come back and get reoriented with their own stuff. And so I'm doing some reflection and also thinking about planting the seeds for what's coming.
When you reflect, how does that work for you? What does your reflection process look like for that?
This is the form it took this year. I start.
Isn't that great? Wait, I'm going to stop you right there. This year, because it can change. That's the best part. Okay,
It's
I like
different.
it. Okay.
The purest form normally, it's just I open up a journal. I open up a notebook. I have lots of them, and I just start writing. But what I find is that maybe the busier or the more full my brain gets, the harder it is for me to focus and just do that. So a shortcut I found this year was I put on a podcast of somebody that I really like to listen to. And I started listening to what she was saying. And then all of a sudden, I started writing. I grabbed my notebook and then I started writing. This was all done on a plane. So that helped too, because there were even less opportunities to be distracted. But it was like pretty solid few hours of listening to the podcast, taking it off, writing down what was coming to me.
Okay, I love that. So are you naturally more responsive in that way? You can find a prompt and then you get that? Or was that totally new in the framework with which you're using?
That was totally new. I didn't even know that would happen. I just thought I want to listen to what the person I'm listening to is a woman named Frances Fry. And I was like, I want to see what she's talking about. So I pulled up a couple episodes and then the reason I really like listening to her stuff is because I connect with it and it actually speaks to different parts of my background. And so as I was doing that, I just started getting right into reflective mode, and that's where the writing came.
That's interesting you say that, because when I need to reflect, it is not something I can just sit down and wait, or I'm not inspired to reflect. So I will block off probably a half of a day because I don't know if it'll take me 20 minutes or if it will take me all half of the day. And I will open a book, for example, that I'm reading, or there's a book I have about quantum leaps that's based off of quantum physics. And I'll just randomly pick a page and read until something will jog me. And then it's like, good, I'm reflecting. This is what I was thinking about. That helped me make this connection. Off I go. I naturally am that way, and I've always looked for that. So now I'm going to have to check out Francis Fry's podcast so that because it's a very cool way to do. What are some other ways you've prompted the reflection process?
Coaching is a reflective process. You're thinking inward. I'm reflecting on what's important to me. And sometimes after a session, I'll start writing.
Is it typing writing or is it handwriting?
It's handwriting.
Yeah. What bigness comes out of your reflections? How's that for a question?
Good question. Bigness. I'm going to start using bigness too.
Bigness too. It's great when you're under 10. Can you tell mine's just now 12?
Yeah. It's a feeling. To answer, it's hard to quantify, but there's a feeling I get where I'm like, I'm onto something. And then if I look back on it, that something might have been pretty small in retrospect, or sometimes it's like big. And I know that's abstract, but I could think about listening to Francis Fry's stuff and just reconnecting to past difficulties that I experienced. She talks a lot about trust and about belonging and how teams can harness that and as a performance lever. Which I totally agree with. And I started thinking back to not feeling that way, like times in my life as a kid where I didn't feel like I belonged or didn't have trust. And the the pain maybe, or like just the feeling like I didn't fit in. And then later on in my life, thinking about when I was forming my own teams, the painstaking lengths I went to try to do the opposite, to try to create an environment where everybody wanted to be there. So for me, that was like, whoa, I heard it. And then my mind went back to this place and I started going writing.
Amazing. And what do you do with your writing?
Sometimes it just stays in the book and then that's that. But other times where it goes is it's becoming either training content or coaching content that I'm working on with clients, companies, or sometimes it becomes an article or something I share on social media. But sometimes it also just stays in the notebook and I forget about it.
I know in your work, you are also working with performance levers.
I am.
Yeah. And so when you are catalyzed in some way, and especially through reflection and the teams that you've been building and the things that you are doing, what are the performance levers that you're looking for that you're also helping others achieve or build even?
Now, because of my place in the coaching market, my niche, if you will, it's communication coaching is the thing that I'm known for, the people that do know of me. And so I'm usually looking at communication as the first lever. It's how are people communicating? What's the quality of their interactions? What are the blockers? How is their team responding to them? How are they responding to others? That kind of stuff. That's usually the first lever. But if I'm coaching somebody long term, or if I'm working with a team long term, it could go in a number of different directions.
Yeah, based off of their unique makeup, what their goals are, things like that. That's very interesting. Well, let's stick with communication for a minute because that's a biggie. And when you're working with somebody around in a team, somebody or somebody's in a team, how do you tie that back to the business levers that organizations are looking for to understand the impact or the influence on moving the needle?
Good question. I mean, that's really, what you're really saying is what's the ROI? Like,
well, actually, I'm not
because
because what we're doing doesn't always, which is why I said influence to move the needle, because sometimes that's what we as an organization need. We're looking for that outcome and that ROI, but that's really not what we need. What we need is the fuel to make the needle move so we can get the ROI. It's a whole different game, right?
We're speaking the same language too. Because when you said the fuel, that you gave me a word to describe something I was feeling in the moment, but I didn't have a word.
Yeah.
if you're listening right to the audio version of this, Jess was just doing a dance move in response to me saying she gave me the word. So yeah, for tracking.
Yeah.
But the word fuel,
Uh-huh.
I think, stay with me for a second on this and let me see if
Okay.
I can
Okay.
process this out because I don't think I've articulated it this way
Hmm.
before. Say I'm working with a leader at a team at a company on their communication. That is what they have sought out, or the company sought me out to work with them on this deliverable thing.
Yep.
But the secondary benefit, which is maybe way better, is a feeling the person starts to have about themselves.
Ah.
They start to have more fun, more joy, more connection to what matters to them, more connection to who they really are. And the amount that spreads to the people that report to them, or like if they're the head of a whole organization, that spreads and cascades down because that person is now starting to feel a bit more joy or just connection to who they really are. It's really hard to quantify that, but I think that's probably the bigger return than the tactical thing I'm helping this person with.
Oh, okay. So let's say I want to know from an experience you've had. What was an experience you had that you were doing this work and consciously or unconsciously, you ended up in that place where that feeling appeared? What was that? What was the time and the thing that when that feeling appeared, and how did that actually create what was able to come next? Regardless if the goal was achieved or not, something got moved and shifted so that.
Yesterday was the most recent one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Every
I'll
day.
just give
I
it
like it.
the quick. It's not every day, but it's
Yeah.
yesterday. I had one of those
Uh,
moments where I actually stopped and was like, this was really cool and special. This was an unlock. Yesterday, I was working with a senior leader at a tech company that's an engineering leader and working on communication. But when I'm coaching somebody, we're working on all of the stuff, not just communication. And this person's profile is on the serious side, very data driven, but also realizes that in order to be more impactful at work, they need to be a better communicator. This person's identified that the great ones, the great leaders that this person admires, they can tell a story better. They can move people. They can do more than just sharing numbers and details and strategy. And so, what sounds as strange as this might be, I've worked with this person now for about 4 different hour-long sessions. And yesterday, the unlock was happiness and joy in the way the person spoke to me. Not to say the person is walking around unhappy and miserable all the time. That's not the case. This is a happy person. But it was expressed. I finally saw it come out in the way the person spoke with me, smiling, laughing a bit, not over the top, but as we talked about what's going on at work, I saw it come out and I was like, we just saw something big here. And now that's an unlock. That's an unlock because I feel like now imagine if this person goes into the next meeting with the 100 people that are in that part of the organization and has that kind of energy compared to what it was before, which might have just been no feeling, less feeling, dry. Now everybody, the 100 people who just watched that Zoom or were in the meeting, maybe they leave and they're feeling a little better about the project, but about other stuff too. And it just can cascade.
If you are ready to make a real impact in your business and you've waited too long to take action, go to reddirection.com and click on Solutions to find out how.
I was in my early 20s and I needed to all of a sudden manage a team of I think there were 12 of us on site. And then quickly there was a team that was dispersed that was growing that I was also responsible for. And here I am, I'm in my early 20s and I didn't know what I was doing. I actually was like, I was just studying for chemistry tests. What is this? I don't understand. And so I decided, what would I do? I would read a book. So I started to manage by self-help book. And that was the worst thing and the best thing I think I could have ever done, Tim. And you look back, and I can't even remember when I realized that. I was probably 5 years later because it was not working. I was trying all kinds of other things. I found a different way that worked. And so it kind of like went by the wayside. But I was doing a reflection process and I was thinking, oh man, why would those people actually want to read that book? What was I actually thinking? And then it was I was trying to manage by self-help because if we were all focused on something together, we would move that needle together. So I had the right idea, but I didn't have a coach, didn't understand that was a concept at the time. And looking back, it was great. Those people probably still to this day think I'm crazy. Or they're like, man, she made me a reader. I don't know. It could be either one. But for me personally, going, okay, so what it did, it helped me quickly. I had to quickly figure out, how do people respond to different situations? So even though I was trying to use the book as a tool to move the needle forward, that's not what happened. I used the feedback from what was coming out to understand the communication so that I could do a better job and help remove those obstacles and make them feel very empowered to do their job, whether I was in the office or I was out at a remote site.
Very astute. So you gained from the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, hindsight being 2020, that was like 5 years later, after most of those people had moved on and some other crew had come in and all of that wonderful goodness. But it's interesting to think about in relationship to what you were saying of where those insights come and when they come. Do you think the senior leader that you were working with yesterday, do you think they felt it? Did you point it out?
I wish I did, but I caught it. It was one of those things where I caught it at the very
Uh-huh.
end. I caught it at
Uh-huh.
the very end of the session, and I was like, "Oh, here it is." And then I didn't actually name it, and I should have. And we ran out of
And we
time.
ran out. I know. And so there's always that next to see how it shows up and reflect back. One of the companies I'm working with, they had a whole bunch of stuff happen all at once. And it's all kinds of weird, messy craziness. And so we're talking about some very necessary things of what we have to do right now to just make the business run based off of all this structural work and things that were going on last year that they were implementing. And she throws up this spreadsheet and it's above her goal that she's been working toward revenue wise for a couple of years now. And she's like, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I know we talked about this. You knew it was coming. Can we just stop and celebrate? You hit your number. We don't celebrate enough. So let's celebrate more.
100%. And now I want to go send an email as soon as our recording is over and just be like, "Hey, yesterday at the end of our session, this cool thing happened and I didn't get a chance to say it. And I've been thinking about it. And here it is."
Well, if you do it, awesome. If you do it in person, awesome. And if you never do it because you have to wait for the right time for it to show up to really impact, there's that too. Isn't that cool that we have this awesome tool to really help people?
I remember the first one I remember of this type was I wasn't an executive coach. I was a basketball coach for freshman high school boys in Detroit, in the Detroit area. And I was doing a review of film of like a game. That's what you do. Part of practice usually is sometimes coaches can look at the film and go through where we did well, a lot of times where we screwed up. And I remember I found this really small, detailed, nuanced thing that no one except a basketball coach would have really picked up on. But this 15-year-old who was quiet and shy and wasn't like the star of the team did exactly the right rotation on defense and then got right back to where he was supposed to be. And I was like, "Whoa, stop." His name's Bob. I said, "Stop and look at what Bob just did." And I rewound it like 3 times. And then the second time, half the kids got what I meant. And the third time, they all were like, "Okay, I see what you meant." And I was just like, that's exactly why we drill this. That's exactly what we want to see. Great job, Bob. And so then I moved on. Well, guess what happened after that? The best defensive rotation person on the team was, no surprise, it was Bob. For the rest of the year, it became like a point of pride that he did that part of our strategy really well because it like locked in that we stopped and celebrated it. I remember that. And the reason I remember that story is because that's true with coaching senior leaders too, or like as a manager leader, if you like stop and point something out that somebody did well, I think that's how you change behavior. You catch them doing it right and then like tell them about it. And it helps people lock in. They want to do it again.
The work that I do and the work that you do have some similarities. And so I would toss out, there's always some sort of a framework. There's always a set of tools to choose from. Yet, because each situation is unique, that means each implementation is also unique.
Totally true. And also probably why I paused on the question is because it is a little different or a lot different with each individual I work with. And it comes down to discovery, like me listening at the beginning and thinking, okay, what's going on? What's the status quo? Where do we want to go? And what's getting in the way of it? And by the way, sometimes the client isn't 100% sure what's getting in the way of it.
You're listening to the Bold Business Podcast, hosted by Jess Dewell, a nationally recognized strategic growth consultant. She works with business owners and executives to integrate just two elements that guide business through the ups and downs of growth. Number one, know what work is necessary. Number two, do all the work possible. Schedule a complimentary consultation to find out more at reddirection.com.
We all hit difficult times within our control and outside of our control. What is a time that you've had to face, and maybe it's your one of the most difficult things that you've faced in your life, in your career, and how did the tools that you're working with today help you through, and what was the outcome, if you're willing to share those?
Sure. The most recent that comes to mind is in 2020, I was working for a company. I actually went to work for one of my clients and unexpectedly lost my job. And wasn't alone. A few of us lost our jobs on my team, most of my team all at once, but it was sudden. And my wife and I had just had our second daughter. So we had a newborn at home, and we live in San Francisco, and it ain't cheap. So I'd never experienced that before. It just felt like the floor fell out from underneath me. And I was in the middle of my career. I felt pretty confident about myself at that point. And I felt like I lost a lot of that confidence. And thankfully, I was working with my own coach at the time, who is someone that's certified in the same methodology as me. So we worked on things that I was able to take what I experienced through that coaching. And in some cases, I can apply similar things with my clients. But yeah, I'll pause there, and we can take that in any direction you want.
I want to talk about your confidence. When did you realize all confidence was lost and you needed help? Was it right away? Was it after talking with your wife? Was it several days later when the grief hit, or the reality of the situation?
Yeah, you're getting through the phases. Because my first reaction was, it was like different phases. It was shock, and then it was rejection of the idea. I got this wrong. And then eventually it got to, wow, I lost my confidence. I might not be as good as I thought I was at what I do. Or maybe they realized I was never right for this and I'm no good. That kind of stuff started hitting me, and it got really heavy feeling, but it didn't happen all at once. It was like this wave all of a sudden. I remember I was at the playground with my kids out of work, and this was maybe 10 days after it happened. And I thought, okay, I got this under control. Yeah, I did not have it under control, the feeling of it. And it just, a wave of emotion just hit me away from my kids. I start crying. And I'm like, what is happening right now to me? And I just realized I got to let this out. I feel serious pain and tension that I got to let out. And I just let it happen. My kids were off playing. They didn't see it. Not that I wouldn't cry. I do cry in front of them, but I remember that moment.
Well, I'm willing to cry in front of my family also, but not when it's about things that might impact them. Right? I mean, there's and depending on the situation, only because I have a worrier child and I have a worrier husband. So that's a thing where it's like, okay, I got to go cry by myself first, and then I can go from there. That's an interesting thing about that confidence piece. So did you ever lose trust in yourself?
I don't know. I'm struggling to think. My gut reaction is, heck yes, I did. I was like, heck yes, I did. I don't know how long exactly that feeling stayed. Fortunately, I had people like my coach, and then I have some very close friends that I could talk to, and that I wasn't feeling like I was doing this completely on my own. Like I was able to pick myself back up and remember I do have value, and I am good at some things. And that was part of the process of picking myself back up.
I don't know if I could do that. I think it's awesome for your situation, looking back, that you'd be okay crying in front of your family. I can't get over that because I don't think I could do that. Just be honest. I also want to honor that in you. I think that is a level of vulnerability I don't have. And I'd like to be able to say, just, wow, Tim, that's amazing. And then to know that, so you've got all these other things happening. You have all of this happen. You recognize you probably did lose trust in yourself. Did you ever feel like you didn't belong anywhere? Or was it just there, or in that profession? Or was it at all?
Yeah, I felt particularly in that profession. I was in tech, and that was the first job I had. I've worked with tech for years, but that was the first time I went and worked for a tech company. And I just remember feeling, yeah, I don't belong. And by the way, I really don't think I belong. And not in a bad negative way. I just actually think I'm better suited doing what I'm doing now, which is that's where the story goes when we're ready to get there. But yeah, I did feel on the negative side, I was like, I don't belong. I maybe not good enough even, or the things I was telling myself.
Well, shit, we all feel that, Tim. I got to tell you. And I appreciate you sharing this and being so open about it because it does mean sometimes our work happens when we least expect it, but the work that we've been doing along the way could help us. And so now my question would shift into a little bit of so knowing that you were going through all of that, knowing that this was a huge shift, it was going to require a reset of a lot of things and a recommitment to yourself, trust and awareness and confidence. Was that able to allow you to create a baseline for you to figure out maybe tech isn't my world?
What started happening was one of the first responses I had was, I'm going to get another job right away. I'm not even going to stop and think about this or deal with this emotionally. Just going to go. And I got into interviewing quickly for similar types of jobs. And I just wasn't feeling excited about, I felt like I was kind of, faking it almost in the conversations. And I had to be honest with myself, like, do I really want to go and do this again? And the answer was a clear no. But then it was like, okay, well, what do I do? I have to figure something out. There was a pressure of the need to find income. Maybe 3 weeks after I lost the job, maybe even less, I had a night where I opened a notebook and I just started writing. And my kids were in bed. I think my wife probably went to bed early. And I just sat on my couch and it started coming out and like super clear. And it wasn't ready for this initially. I probably wrote in other ways before, but I was at a place where I felt clear and I started writing down what I want. And the things were coming out. I kept that page. I wrote down, I don't know, a handful of things, maybe like a list of 12 things. And 12 wasn't the target. It was just keep going until I run out of things, ideas. And it was things like do what I enjoy for a living, find a job or figure something out where I'm leaning into my strengths and not my weaknesses. And at the time I remember thinking, I don't want to have a boss again. I don't want to deal with that. Okay, this is making my choice to go on my own a little bit more clear. And so I went through this list and I just shut the notebook and was like, I think I'm going to go start my own thing now.
So coming full circle all the way back to the beginning of our conversation about reflection. So this was a huge catalyst of a reflection journaling.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the beginning of it, I wrote what I want to be true 18 months from now.
Oh,
I
okay.
started with stuff like my daughter's going to be this age. I have a newborn, so she's going to be a year and a half. At the time, I had a 2.5-year-old. She's going to be 4. So when they're this age, I'll be this age. This is what I want to be true by this point. And then I went back 18 months later and pulled it out and was like, wow, 11 of the 12 had happened in the 18 months.
Celebration. You even celebrated. Look at that.
I did. Yes. I celebrated. I totally did.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Because you saw them completed, you acknowledged that work. Did you consciously work on them or did you just be like, oh, it's time for me to look at this again?
I didn't really look at it, but those things were so clear to me that I generally knew. It wasn't like things I wrote down and forgot. They were there.
How do you set goals then? Do you do them in 18-month increments like that, like these big ones? And then you're just doing the work and you're seeing how they have, or are they like very specific time-based? I'm all about SMART goals, but I'm also all about the big ones. So I'm curious which realm you're falling into in the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm usually more in the camp of behaviors instead of goals. I want to try to do certain habits and repeat them and get really good at sticking with them. And so that's more where I spend my time is like, how do I want to operate every day consistently? But when I do set goals, I don't know, sometimes you just have this clarity that comes to you. And I think you totally get it. It's not there all the time. There's sometimes I want it to come and it's just, I procrastinate. But that day, it just came, it was like the pen was moving itself. And 18 months was the timeline for those goals. I think part of the reason 18 months was clear is because I thought that's, if this stuff, if these ideas aren't working in 18 months, I know that's enough time I've given it where, okay, I need to go figure something else out. I think that's where the time limit came in for that.
That was based off of your runway. How much cash do I have? How much time do I have to actually build this to replenish and keep going?
And I definitely did not have 18 months of runway either. I set a lot of goals early
Yeah.
when I started my
Sure,
business,
sure.
beyond those, that list
Just
of
to
12 or
keep
whatever it
going.
was.
Yeah, because you got to do that.
But the initial, I think it was more like, I think I gave myself like 8 months to prove the concept was going to work. And one of the goals I remember was like, do what I like, do what I love to do for a living, and don't bankrupt myself.
There are a lot of businesses that are fairly large, still considered small businesses, but that are very large revenue based, where the founders or the managing team uh, doesn't take a salary. And every time I experience that, I'm like, how long have you been in business? I'm curious where else you are. Uh, oh, but we're all about this, or we're all about that, or it's all about the community and it's all about lifting everybody up. And I'll say something like, how often is that reciprocated back to you? Oh, not very often. Well, okay. So how about if the boundary is reciprocate as much as you know you'd be receiving back? How would that look? Because that's a mindset. I have so much I want to give is fantastic. Reciprocity is amazing. My whole business, Tim, is based off of reciprocity in a lot of different ways. But at the same point in time, I have a salary. Same point in time, I get paid for my work. And there's something to be said for that, because it's great to bring that one side of it, but without the part and the way the world works also built in, we forget. It's amazing how big of a business that can be built and we forget something like that. And if we find out our boundaries aren't as strong as they need to be to have a company that has longevity, which comes back to a lot of the communication things that you specialize in.
Good. You tied that right back in.
And so I'm curious what you were thinking as I was just saying that. It's an interesting concept to think about how all of that works and the trickle down effect that we get when we're leading an organization and we're paying people and we're getting money in, and we're actually not truly fully leveraging what our boundaries are to the benefit of our everybody, because we think we're doing it for the good of the good.
Most people who do what we do for a living, that would resonate with them. It does with me. 2021 was the first year I started, and I think I almost burned out 6 months into it. I felt like I was working nonstop. I was taking on clients that were in all different time zones. I was some international companies where I would meet with a team or individual in Singapore virtually, and then the next morning in London, and I'm in San Francisco. So I just, and all through the day would be as many meetings as I could load up with. And I just stopped in the 6 months into it and had to have a full reset, because I was gonna burn out, or worse. Felt like I was gonna have a heart attack or something bad was gonna happen. And that was where I had to stop and evaluate what you're talking about. Was, I'm doing this because I love it. I want to help people, but I also want to take care of myself. And so what does that mean? How do I quantify it, and how do I want to change?
And do you do it from energy management? Do you do it from time management or something else?
It was calendar management initially.
Yeah.
I had to create some rules at the beginning. And again, thankful that I had a coach at the time,
Yeah.
a coach who's still my mentor in many ways. She challenged me. She said, I want you to clear the rest of your week. I think it was like a Wednesday. And I was like, no way. I hadn't canceled the meeting in 6 months. I don't typically cancel a meeting anyway. But she was like, the world is going to go on, and you have to show yourself that the world will continue to move if you take 2 days off, and you need to. And so I said, no way. And then I thought about it a lot after our coaching session ended. And then I slowly started doing it. I canceled the rest of Thursday and Friday. And when I saw that she was right, like, people were okay. They were okay with moving their Friday meeting to like next Tuesday. It wasn't the end of the world in any way. Then we took it the next step, and it was like, okay, these are the hours I actually want to work. If I need to meet with somebody that's in a Asia Pacific time zone, I'll do that, but it's a one-off. And if I'm going to do something early in the EMEA time zone, like I'll do that, but it's a one-off. And generally, here are my working window. And so I redesigned everything that way, and I'm still doing it to this day. So it was really impactful.
You're listening to the Bold Business Podcast, hosted by Jess Dewell, a nationally recognized strategic growth consultant. She works with business owners and executives to integrate just two elements that guide business through the ups and downs of growth. Number one, know what work is necessary. Number two, do all the work possible. Schedule a complimentary consultation to find out more at reddirection.com.
Hey. I have to work with my energy more than my calendar, in the sense that whatever those non-negotiables are that are present, I am actually working from an energy place. So, for example, when I wake up, typically the hustle and bustle of the morning is when I am the most focused. So a couple days of week, I am out of the hustle and bustle of getting up, getting around, doing all of those things, and I am closed off, and I'm doing my deepest creative work, thought work, my time out from the world, if you will, to really do that reflection, do that assessment, make that prioritization piece, and then the rest of the day can go on. And the later in the day I get, the more task-oriented it is. So if people are expecting emails from me during the day, well, they've learned. Most people learn real quick that I answer the emails at lunchtime and at the end of the day, if it's on the same day. But that's one of those things where I was that block of time where it's, what can I do? How can I show up? And it's energy management to make sure I know the necessary work to be done. Am I going to commit to the necessary work and give it the space it needs when I can actually do the work? And so I've gone into the calendaring backwards in that sense of, so when is that time? How do I structure it so I can carve out that time? And breakfast, kids to school, morning meditations, those are things that are really exciting to me, but I don't need to do them every day. Or it's in my best interest to say every day is actually detrimental to my overall well-being, because it's also the time I'm not putting to something else that will help me achieve my next goal, move that necessary work. I understand the necessary work, but am I going to actually do it? Am I going to commit to that? And that's an interesting trade-off when everything is in that same box of stuff I love. And that's the hardest place to make choices, Tim. For me, I'll speak for me. That's the hardest place for me to make.
Yeah, a lot of what you said rings true for me too. And one of the things I was neglecting was my own physical health in those first 6 months when I felt close to burnout. And so one of the things I built in is I'm gonna exercise during my workday. And what I found, yeah, because I'm a parent of a couple of young kids, and if I did it every day when they got home, after school, after preschool or kindergarten, I probably have 3 hours until it's bedtime. So if I'm working out for 90 minutes, and then it's dinner time, I'm not going to see them. And I don't want that. I'm not going to see them much, at least. So, and I actually found, you're talking about managing energy. I found that I have a second wind when I'm exercising. And I have a home gym, and I will sometimes during rest periods, I'll go in and work on purpose. So I'll do something, and then there's a 2-minute rest, and I'll go in and write something down or answer a quick email, or and have a list of to-do things of tactical quick things that I'm doing while I exercise.
I like that. My gym is in the same building I am in, but it's not in my same unit, but I like this. I could do this. I may take that idea and work on it, because it would be nice to be able to check things off. It could be I could run upstairs and chop the vegetables for dinner and then go back down and do the next piece. Or you're right. How many emails can I get out? What can I do? Because we forget. And then those are the things that actually feel overwhelming. I get overwhelmed by the small tasks because it takes away from my ability to do that important work. And I am wired for that deep work. And our world today is not set up to support that at all. And so that is something that I know I am appreciative of my mentors and my coaches and my advisors over the course of many years that have helped me figure that out, to know, okay, cool, I can do this. And I love how you put, I hope I was positive about, yeah, I don't do the whole morning thing, not even for myself. Crazy, I know. And you're like, I exercise at lunch. Oh, that's a great, I do too. I'll walk or I'll exercise, I'll go do a workout. And I love that idea of being able to mix it in if we can't or we want to do the other things, can't do it any other time, or we want to do them at the same time. Are you a do you ever do the stints where you burn the candle at both ends?
I do, but if it's necessary, it'll be like a short burst of something. And now I think I'm at a good enough balance where I understand sometimes that's got to happen. If it's happening where that's becoming normal, then I've got to reassess things. And that hasn't happened in quite a while where I've had to be like, oh, wow, this is taking way too much space.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I know that I like endings. I force endings. Everything has an end, and the reason is because then I can re-up, or I can assess, or I can celebrate, because if I never end, I never know what good I did. If I never end, I never truly understand, so I can't take a thing on one thing and apply it and compare it to another or overlay it to see things, and that's something that I always have done, ends. How about you? Is there something that you really rely on that helps keep you going? Or does just that natural progression of the when the journaling arises or when you're intentionally seeking out an opportunity to reflect from prompts, is that where you're getting that?
My day to day structure relies a lot on a paper to do list. And sometimes I'm really great at, always have it, but sometimes I'm good at using it to be way more impactful and intentional about things. Sometimes it's just a tactical list of things that I've got to do. But when I'm really doing it well to my standard, there's times where I have things like stop and reflect on this, and that's at the top of the priority list. And then other times I'm overloaded with the small things like you said, and there's less time to stop and celebrate the wins. And it'll happen if I'm on an airplane or something where there's nothing else going on, and I'll be like, wow, this happened.
It feels and that's good. We take it when it shows up. That's a really big thing. How do you prioritize?
I have a process that I actually learned from one of my clients that I've been following for 3 years. One of my clients that is really organized in that way. And I have a to-do list and a shutdown process. So at the end of the day, I look back at the to-do list and re-inventory for either later today or the night. I'm sort of like the night, if I'm going to do any work at night, I'm like, this is the one thing I'm going to do instead of opening my inbox and just doing it all. But generally, like I've got it at a place where I'm not doing much of that anymore. That was me when I was a little overloaded. So the inventory, like taking stock of the prioritization, is at the end of the day, I look at, okay, when I do start working next time, based on what's here and what I know is coming, what are the priorities tomorrow? So it's not just moving the priority list over exactly as it is or the to-do list, it's reprioritizing daily. That's what helps me.
And then how do you know if the priorities are aligned with your bigger goals, your habit changes, your larger stated goals in whatever form they take as you have them?
I don't know. That's a good question. Sometimes what I'll do is write at the top of the goal of the to-do list what the theme is,
Ah,
like the point of emphasis that's on my mind.
uh-huh.
It'll be like, be bold, or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, be bold because you're going to be on the Bold Business podcast.
yeah.
It'll be a theme
Uh-huh.
of a mindset thing I want to have or like a habit that I want to remember.
Mhm.
If it's something like we've talked about exercise,
Yeah.
so getting in exercise a certain amount of time per week is important enough that it's on my daily to-do list on the days, and I want to try to get it. And here's what I want to do.
Mhm.
So yeah, I try to keep the important themes written down too.
That's cool. I have a word of the day. I've had a word of the day forever. And actually, when you said theme, I'm like, does my word of the day? So I went back and I'm looking at my week this week and last week, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, they actually align to what my current goals are for this 3-month period. I do bigger goals on 3-month period for check-in points. So there's always either a milestone or a completion or something that's going on. I'm like, oh yeah. And this is funny. Today's word is acknowledge. How's that?
You've got today's word.
Today's word.
How does that word impact your day?
That's a good question. I usually I pick a few ahead of time just because I want them so I can wake up right. So I'll do a couple weeks at a time. When I am inspired when I am actually creating my priorities and I'm understanding what works. So I am really good at saying yes to a lot of things. I'm really good at helping out everywhere I can. I'm really good at not saying no. And so one of the things that the word of the day actually turned out to be helpful with inadvertently was the ability to understand what was I doing for this period of time. And I do everything in quarters. What are those biggest goals, which I never have more than 10. And I like the concept of how does it feel? How does it look? And how does it sound? And so by the end of the day, in my shutdown process, my end of the day is, did I get the things done? How did acknowledge show up? And what is my word for tomorrow? So I'm like preceding what comes the next day, because I already know what's going to happen the next day, right? For the most part, and go from there. So it's my prompt. It's like my prompt.
I like that. I'm going to try that.
I've been doing this for years, and I started because I was in a group. I had one of the coaches I had decided that they were going to put together a group, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll come to this group. And we'd get together in the mornings, and she says, everybody bring your own word of the day. Nobody did except for me. And my word became the group's word for the day. And then when I was done with that group, I just kept doing it. And that was how it went. And it's been happening ever since. So do you know when you're doing work that's outside of what is your lever with which you use to measure, okay, I've prioritized these things, but I'm out of alignment with my goals? Do you have a way to check day to day, week, to have this sense of I'm doing the necessary work versus I'm doing work?
Such a good question. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I actually do this? 'Cause for sure. I think the honest truth on it, I'd like to say something better, but I have these two periods in the year, January and July, where my work gets slow because companies slow down. There's people coming back from the holidays and then people taking summer holiday or vacation. And I've built in that that's going to be my time to reflect and examine how things are going. Of course, if things are steering way off, like I'm working too much, or it feels like I'm getting pulled into I'm using my energy in the wrong kind of ways in between those periods, I'll reevaluate. But at least in the last 12 months, I think this process has worked well for me, where I know that there are these periods where it's reflection time. And then in between them, it's go time. I feel like there's got to be more. Like, I feel like you have an answer to this that I want to learn too. Like, how do you do it?
10 years into Red Direction and many more years before that I was out in the working world, I didn't have a concept of what working on business meant. What does strategic growth look like? What does growth in general look like? How do you communicate that growth? And how important that communication is, and what I feel people are going to take away. And so it doesn't matter the words I say, it's what I feel and how they're actually conveyed, not the words themselves, that actually carry the meaning, which means we get success or we don't get success, or we move the needle or we don't. We get momentum and build on it, or we slow down and are at risk of stall, whatever that is. And people have been talking about this thing of you got to have CEO day. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. What are you talking about? I've been doing lots of things. I've been buying and selling businesses. I've never taken a CEO day. What are you talking about? Turns out, I was like, maybe I just didn't like the name. I'll be real with you. I don't need a CEO day. What is that? I'm going to go do the things I'm going to do anyway. And so it actually turns out, for me working on the business, I started calling it a present retreat. And so I have one of my 5 days of working is dedicated to on the business. I don't take calls. I don't have meetings. My door is shut. My access is off. And it has turned out it started out 2 hours, and it turned out that present piece, getting present, really mattered. It turned out that the retreat really mattered, because retreat is also, people think of like, ooh, spa, take your time, whatever. It is stop, backtrack. What do we have? So we know where to go. Yeah.
Where do you go?
Where do I go? Well, it could be here, right? It could be here in my office.
Yeah.
I do try and take a longer outside time. My exercise on those days could be a hike for a couple of hours in the morning or the afternoon. It could be headphones on and meditation for a long meditation or 2 shorter meditations. And then I'm in the lists. I'm in the obstacles. I'm in the opportunities. And it's almost like if you could see it like a cartoon, it's literally stuff is flying everywhere. And at the end of the day, I piece it back together and go, we've been working on that wrong. That's gone. And it can and this is happening week to week. I will totally change the rest of the quarter based off of what is showing up to make sure it's necessary. Are we doing the necessary work?
I was thinking when you first mentioned earlier in our conversation, when you said you'll carve out a few hours and do this, I was thinking that would be so hard for me to do because I think I would just pull out my phone or I'd start doing something else or start reading a book. It's so hard to stay on task.
It took me 12
But
it took me 12 weeks to actually have a real one, and that was just a 2-hour
okay,
one. It took me years to get to a whole day. But it's true
that's
because
great.
what happens, what do you do? When you first have this time, you don't know what to do with it, and there's all this I'm gonna call it head trash. Gotta answer those emails. For me, I even got to the point where I was in my office, I was going through my books. What could I donate of my business books? And I'm like, "Really?" And it turns out I had just had to relearn that time was available. I had to commit to the time first, and then what I did with it evolved because I could rely and trust in myself that I was gonna keep that time.
I like it. I think you've given me a goal to work on. There are a couple goals to work on. That's another one I'll add. I was also just thinking airplane time is usually when I'm able to do this.
How often do you travel?
More often now in the last 6 to 7 months because companies are doing more in-person stuff. Before, barely at all during the pandemic. So now fairly often, and if it's a long trip, like if it's a cross country trip, I actually am now looking forward to that part of it because I'll bring a book that I want to read that's going to help me think about an idea that I'm into right now, or I bring my notebook, or I sometimes will just open my computer and it'll be time to write about what I want to write about. And so I'm getting it. That's about the only place I consistently get it is a plane where there's literally no other distraction. It's challenging now that some of the airlines have free Wi-Fi, so my phone is on it, and I'm still getting texts, or like I'm texting people. But you can put that away, and then your choice is: do you want to watch a movie, or do you want to take a nap, or do this? And I think it's pretty fun. It's fulfilling to get work done. This kind of work.
One of my clients, they're past clients. They were my very first client, and they were my longest client. It's great. For 17 years, we worked together. And he would be like, the first part of my annual meeting was always me getting on a plane and going to some other city across. He's here in Seattle. He'd go to the East Coast somewhere and have dinner and then get back on a plane and come back. So he would get out of to your point, get out of the foray, and he would do all of this work to prepare for his company's meeting on a plane. I think I love being reminded of that, Tim, because yes, I also travel, and I don't necessarily think I don't know how I use my plane time, so I will not judge it yet. But I'm going to look a little closer. Well, I want to know what makes it bold. What makes it bold to take time to really know yourself and to do the work that we've been talking about or other work that we make up for ourselves so that we can do what we want to do and get to where we want to go?
What makes it bold is that it is vulnerable and can be scary to spend that time with yourself on your own and not being distracted by all the things that right now are pulling us in all these other directions away from that connection to ourselves. I think that's what makes it bold. And it's the scariness, the vulnerability, but also the creativity that comes, the insight, the reflectiveness. This stuff's awesome, but definitely bold.
Jess hosts the Bold Business Podcast to provide insights for building a resilient, profitable business by deeply understanding your growth strategy, ensuring market relevance and your company's future. It is bold to deeply understand your growth strategy with your host, Jess Dewell. Get more information about how to drive solutions and reset your growth mindset at reddirection.com. Thank you for joining us, and special thanks to our post-production team at The Scott Treatment.